Hello everybody, welcome to Fruitful Trees, and I did it again. I went to Pine Island, Florida and went to Fruitscapes, and I did a video a couple of days ago. It was a long video, it was an excellent video, I'll put the link below. But we have more to that video, because they've been growing fruit trees there for a long time, especially mango trees, and I'm always trying to find out what is best space-wise. And some of you get upset that I keep talking about this topic, but I don't know what's best, to be honest with you. And I go to some people's place and they're thriving with high density, and some other places they're not looking too well. But all of that is short term. I want to see long term how it's going to be. And today on the show we're going to be at Fruitscapes in Pine Island, Florida, and they're going to show you how it is long term, the mango trees, what's happening over there. So we're going to go look at Steve, meet Steve today again, and we're going to go continue this video from the other day and see how mangoes planted at different distances will do, according to Steve at Fruitscapes, who's been doing this long term, because everyone can be successful short term at high density, but long term, what's going on? So let's take a look and see Steve now.
This line of mango here, this was planted 20 years ago, 22 years ago. These are all Namdok Mai. They were planted at 8 foot apart. And the idea, the original owner, one of the original owners of this farm was from Thailand, and she wanted to practice like they do in Thailand and keep them at 6 feet tall. After you let the tree get away from you for 5 or 6 years and you don't keep pruning it, it's almost impossible to keep them at that small height again.
Why is that? I know you'll miss a year.
Because what happens is, the branches are starting to form higher and higher, and what you want in order to have a tree that you maintain at a 6 to 8 foot height, you want it to be branching down at the ground about 1 foot off of the ground, not 3 feet up, because 3 feet up, then you lose half of your production right there. You're not getting fruit from here to here.
Yeah, but you're still going to get a good amount of production from
this. You can keep it, but you have to keep it at a higher root. Ideally, we wanted to keep them this high.
I got you.
And if we did that, we would have a 2.5 foot
bush. You wanted to keep them like
of mango. So if you want to keep them at 6, you want to get your mangoes starting 1 foot off the ground up to 6 foot up in the air.
So how tall are these here?
These are about 12 foot right here.
So in Thailand, what size do they keep them in Thailand?
6 to 7 feet.
6, 7 feet. So these are about 12, 10 to 12.
Yeah, 10 to 12.
Okay, so this is what happens, everybody. 8 feet apart, 10 to 12. It's almost like a hedge.
Yeah, it's almost like a hedge.
But you're still going to get a lot of mangoes on each side, right?
You get mangoes on this side. This is the east and west orientation, so this is not ideal. Now you look at this side. Nothing.
Nothing.
The only fruit on this side are stuff that's way up in the air where it gets a little bit of sunlight up here, but everything down on this side, there's 1 or 2, 3 mangoes on this side. And that's because
the sun doesn't hit this side.
That's because there doesn't get any sun on this side.
And in between there's going to be nothing.
And there's no nothing sun in here. So if you can grow your mangoes as a hedge if you want, but you don't get your maximum production because you're only getting production on the 2 sides.
So let me ask you, let's say somebody planted 2 trees next to each other this close, and there's nothing else on the other side of that.
Then you're going to get all your fruit on this side and all your fruit on this side.
Plus the other side too.
Yeah, plus the other.
So that would be better, but still ideal to separate them.
Right. So if we were keeping these at 6 foot, they would come in like this, and you would have sunlight hitting this side, that side. There would be sunlight all the way around on these trees, and you would get literally 3 or 4 times the amount of fruit on a smaller tree that's half the size than you do on this tree that's this size.
Now what if you keep it this size, but you let them, so if they just want fruit in the bottom because they tend to go up.
Yeah, wherever the sunlight is, that's where you get your fruit.
And the bottom part.
The bottom is more shaded, so very rarely do you get any fruit down here.
Okay.
And if we walk to that end, so on the east end of this line, you'll see that the east side of that mango is loaded with fruit because it's always getting sunlight in the morning.
So now, Alex at Tropical Acres, what he's found works is he plants his trees 8 feet apart, and then with the intention, the middle ones are temporary.
Yeah.
So after 4 or 5 years of getting fruit off that, he could take that out and either sell it or get rid of it, either way. And now he leaves his trees with 16 feet, and for the majority of varieties, he found that's ideal.
That's a great idea to do, and that's one thing that we were toying with here. We were thinking, well, if we cannot maintain them at a small height, then what we can do is we can eliminate every other one. But then when we found out maybe 2 in a row were excellent trees, and then that third one was a runt, and then you don't want to rip out an excellent tree and leave a runt, so it was problematic. So it doesn't work out evenly. Like this guy's a runt.
Now, how do you know it's a runt? What do you mean by runt?
The size of the root on that, it's about half the front one there, and then that one, you can get rid of that one, you can get rid of that one, but then you'll go down and you'll find other runts that aren't.
But it'll still get fruit, just not as much?
Yeah, you won't get as much. You can see how broad and full that tree is right there. And then you look at this tree, it's the same age. It's got 1/3 the density of that other tree. So that's why I call it a runt. And it basically only has probably a half a dozen fruit on that tree, whereas the other one has maybe. And
is there any way before you plant of knowing which one it's going to be or not really?
It's hard to tell when they're young.
Sure.
When you plant them in a 3-gallon pot, it's hard to tell which one's going to be the runt. And it could be soil.
This is just like with the, well, what were you going to say? It
could be different factors like the soil, maybe the water was turned off on that one for the first couple of years where it wasn't getting as much water as the other one. There's so many factors.
Well, what I find is if you pick the fruit young, let the fruit stay on it young, that also stunts it a little.
It does. And if you stunt the tree the first couple of years, it always lags behind. But if you let it grow and you maximize and you push that tree for the first couple of years, it seems to continue that bulk up through its life. Whereas the neglected trees at first always look like they've been neglected.
So if you took this tree out, these 2 trees around it would thrive much more.
They would.
This whole space would open up.
That's right. And then I'd be left with the dilemma of, should I remove that one so that I can evenly space them all out? But it's hard to transplant a tree that size.
Yeah, but even if you cut it out, you're still going to get more from these.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
But one of the other purposes is to demonstrate and also to give me a little bit of a wind block for my shade house as well.
Excellent for this video, because I always talk about this topic. So this is what happens when you plant too close and you don't maintain the trees. Now, if you would have maintained this and kept them shorter from the beginning, would that have been a different story? They would have been growing more in the bottom, like the initial goal?
Yeah, they would have.
So you would have planted, to do this the right way, if you're going to plant this close, maintain them at 6 feet like a bush size, so you get a lot on the bottom. But once it grows too high, it's gonna be harder to do that, because once you lose this on the bottom.
Yeah, you see all that wasted space on the bottom where you're not getting any fruit production.
Now, if you cut this back to 6 feet, would it eventually grow back on the bottom?
It would, but the problem is, when you've got a tree at this size, I can show you. Okay. When you have a tree this size and you cut it way back, it will sprout out, but you have this giant wound on top that takes years before the cambium covers it over. And then in that time frame, something will get in there and start burrowing in and rotting out the inside of the trunk. So you probably get about 10 to 15 years of life on that tree before it just starts to fall apart.
Now, I know in Jamaica, when they cut a tree that big like that, they paint the top that they cover to keep this stuff out.
Well, you can paint the top. You can put like a with the asphalt, like a tar on there, which is also toxic to the tree. So, but it will still try to seal over that, and basically you're encapsulating that tar into the tree, so it becomes part of the tree.
So that's an issue.
And so do you really want to do that to your tree? The best thing to do is, if you have a small limb, if you're cutting a small limb like that,
cut it.
In 6 months, it seals itself up and you don't have any rot. But when you're looking at a trunk that's got a foot width, it takes a long time to heal that up, and then you start to get the rot in there. So the best thing to do is to start from the beginning. Keep pruning, keep pruning, keep pruning young branches, and to keep the tree in shape. Because once you have to go down to drastic steps of cutting big, sizable pieces out, then you start to you'll get the rot on the inside.
And once you cut the top layer here, you got to paint the tree so it doesn't get sunburned too. That's something that helps.
It's good if you defoliate the tree completely, especially in the summertime. You want to paint the tree white. But I find that when we get the hurricanes, they're usually in the late summer. We'll go through here and cut the trees right before the hurricane. We don't have time to paint.
Sure.
And they come back really fine. They don't have any sunburn or anything.
Now, I've seen people with trees like almost 100 years old with big trunks that they cut to kind of cut them back and maybe top work them or something else. Sure. But then they have that issue that you're talking about.
You have that exposure. Once you get that rot sealed in there, the tree has a determinate lifespan.
One tip for everyone though is, if you are going to cut a tree like that with a big trunk, don't cut it flat, cut it slanted.
Cut it at an angle, so that the water goes off, and then it gives it more time to heal itself.
All right, great example. I'm glad you have this row so people can see. These trees look much bigger, but they look close apart.
Yeah, these have been more properly maintained. This is an assorted variety. There's 4 Namdok Mai's up here on the front, and then we got Philippine, and we go down to Malika, Glen, Irwin, and then a few varieties that just aren't that great.
So when you say properly maintained, they're big trees, 8
Yeah, you see, they're the original trees that we were planted out here about 24 years ago. So they're the oldest. They're still a couple years older than the other line. These were properly pruned the first few years when Hurricane Charlie hit, which was a major hurricane in 2004. These trees recovered quickly because we pruned them beforehand. The other ones weren't pruned; they fell over, and so they kind of took a while to take off again. But you can see the massive trunk on those things, and they're still only about 15 feet tall. And every 2 years, we'll come through here, whether there's a hurricane or not, and we'll prune these trees back. So at the end of this season, we will come through here and cut about 6 feet off the top of those.
See, okay. But still, even at that, how far apart are these trees?
8 foot.
Even at that, they're still touching, and it's still like a hedge, right?
It is. It's like a hedge, and all the fruit is on this side, on the south side. If we were to walk to the north side, there's nothing.
Now, if let's say this one in the middle was gone. Okay, here's the question, Steve. These 3 trees just like this, or take out the middle one, what's going to get you more fruit? These 3 or taking out the middle? Taking
out the middle one and just leaving the 2 on the side.
Will give you total more fruit.
That would give you more fruit than leaving that one right there.
Okay. And there's the answer, folks. That's it.
But one of the reasons why we do leave them is because it's an assorted line here, and we don't want to take out the varieties that we only have one of. And it also gives us a nice wind block on the north side of our shade house.
Okay, so variety-wise, plant more varieties, you'll get less mangoes, but
you'll have the variety.
But you'll have the variety. But now, what's the difference between this? Let's say these 2 are different varieties. Next to each, or these 3. If these 3 were each different varieties, you get a bunch. But what if it was one tree in the middle with none on the ends, and it was multi-grafted? What would give you more? If they were like not overtaking each other in the multi-graft?
That would be difficult to say, because if it was a multi-graft, each branch would grow disproportionate of another, and it'd be very hard to maintain that tree. And you might have a variety that doesn't produce very much fruit, and you might have a variety that might have a lot of fruit. Like you might have a Namdok Mai on there, and then that always loads up with fruit. And you might have a Bailey's Marvel, and that might fruit for you once every 3 or 4 years. So my opinion, I prefer to plant individual trees. If you want variety, just plant them close, but plant individual trees of each one rather than multi-graft. Multi-graft is fun, it's unique, it's interesting, but for production, I don't think you're going to get the maximum production off of a multi-graft as you would individual trees, even if they were planted close together.
I know someone who has 3 trees in like a triangle shape. So pick it 8 feet, they have one here with none on the side there. And in the center, they get nothing, but the ends of each ones they get on all of them.
Yeah.
So that's...
Yeah, but if they kept those trees shorter, they could get production on all of them on all sides, but they would really have to maintain them at about a 5-foot height.
Gotcha. All right, everybody, that was Steve, and let me show you what I've done here. I have my high density area growing over there, which I'll get into. But this area, I did something. I initially had these trees 10 feet apart, and several times I've taken stuff out to make them 20 feet apart. This is Sunrise, my favorite mango, and that's a dot. And I temporarily put in between here a Karen Michelle, which I sold, and I put a papaya there. But somebody came here last week, and I gave them that tree because now there's 20 feet between these trees. And if I would have let a tree grow there, eventually this would have been one big hedge. Maybe not a bad idea, but I have other areas of high density, so I wanted to leave an area that wasn't high density to see how it would be. And I did the same thing on this side here. I have my little gem, and then I have the other side of the Sunrise, and in between, at one point I had a mango here in 015 and I took it out. Again, if I would have kept that there, this would have been a hedge. Not a bad idea, but I put it back down there temporarily. And this one here, I definitely planted too close, and I'm planning on relocating. This is an orange essence, way too close to my Sunrise. But I have a high density area over there, which I'll show you. But for these, I wanted to give these room. This is a dot mango, and the season's coming. So now this one was 10 feet from this, and I cut it back. It even had mangoes on it, so it was growing back, and it was definitely too close. And then behind it there, I had a fruit punch, and last week I took out that and sold that to someone. So now there's 20 feet between my dot and my white Paris. So I just put that there for now. As we get back here more, so this whole row is 20 feet apart. But as we get here, you see it gets tighter. And I'm gonna leave this, and I'm gonna see how this works. I cut back some of the trees so they're looking like they'll fit. But as you can see, the trees are really tight here. And I'm gonna go with it. Like I said, I don't know anymore what's ideal, what's not ideal. But from today's video with Steve, I see what's working long term and what's not. And it's definitely an eye-opener for me. That's what trees will look like long term. If you go high density, you're creating a hedge. If that's your goal, that's your goal, but you're missing mangoes on 2 sides, maybe even more than 2 sides. So I have this here. This is my Super Alfonso. Looking good this year. And there's a buttercream that I put here, and then I have a guava. And they're 10 feet apart. If I keep them small, it may work. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna see what happens and how it goes. Here I have my guava, and then I have my gram tree. We'll see how that works. And speaking of hedges, look how close I did on this one. Here I have my Pickering, which is looking great. And there I have a Malika. And in between, I literally planted a seedling to see how that'll do. And since this is a Pickering, I might get away with the space, but the seedling I just planted in the middle to see how it would do. But I don't mind if this is a hedge on the back wall here, and there I have a sweetheart. And it's so interesting to see the different growth habits and the heights and how fast or slow they grow as well. All a great learning experience, everybody. And I'm glad we have a long-term high density to show you how it'll look long-term. All right, everybody, thank you for watching. And I'm glad we finally have some examples of what it looks like high density long-term and what things will look like in the future. I'm going to leave this. I'm going to see how it goes. I know a lot of us have been doing high density short-term, but let's see what happens long-term. All right, put your comments and questions below. Thank you, Steve at Fruitscapes. I'll put his link below again. Until then, everybody have a great day and keep growing.